Game of Thrones gave us the word kinslayer. Cousins turning on cousins, blood spilled for crowns, betrayal written in royal bloodlines. Time and time again, we see families tearing themselves apart. Brother against brother, cousin against cousin. It's a staple of medieval-inspired fantasy. But is it just a trope, or is it rooted in real history? In medieval and Tudor England, royal blood was as dangerous as it was precious. Across just a few generations, monarchs turned on their own kin again and again. Today, we'll look at 5 of the most notorious cases, from Edward IV to Elizabeth I, where cousinhood offered no protection from the crown. It's no coincidence the Wars of the Roses were also called the Cousins' War, and at the heart of it stood Edward IV and Henry VI. Henry VI inherited the throne as a child, but he was not suited to the expectations of a medieval king. Prone to mental illness, overshadowed by his queen, Margaret of Anjou, and ill-equipped for the violent politics of his age, Henry was vulnerable, and another branch of the royal line had an arguable claim. Edward of York pressed that claim, and in 1461, after victory at the Battle of Towton, he seized the throne as Edward IV. Yet the struggle did not end there. Henry briefly regained the crown, only to be defeated again. His only son was killed at Tewkesbury, his queen, Margaret of Anjou, captured, and Henry himself thrown into the Tower. Days after the battle, Henry was dead. The official story blamed melancholy, but few believed it. Many suspected murder on Edward's orders. Some even theorized it may have been carried out by his brother, Richard of Gloucester, the future Richard III. Modern analysis of Henry's skull shows evidence of a violent end. One way or another, Edward had eliminated his cousin, stamping out the Lancastrian king. Another cousin caught in the shadow of the throne was Edward Plantagenet, 17th Earl of Warwick, son of George, Duke of Clarence, brother to Edward IV and Richard III. That made him first cousin to Elizabeth of York, queen consort of Henry VII, and by extension, cousin to the king's children. In other words, he was dangerously close in blood to the crown. When Henry VII seized the crown in 1485, his own claim was fragile. To secure it, he locked the young Warwick in the Tower of London. The boy was only 10 years old. Unlike many others, he was not executed at once. Instead, he languished in captivity for more than a decade, a living symbol of the Yorkist line. Warwick's existence became a rallying cry for rebels. Pretenders like Lambert Simnel claimed his identity to stir uprisings. At one point, the real Warwick was even paraded through London to disprove the impostor. Eventually, when another claimant, Perkin Warbeck, posed as one of the princes in the Tower and attempted to overthrow Henry, both he and Warwick were condemned together. In 1499, Warwick was beheaded on Tower Hill, his mental state weakened after so many years in confinement. His only crime? His bloodline. You might be wondering by now, what happened when monarchs chose mercy instead? That's the story for our next episode, rulers who spared their kin and paid for it with their crowns, or even their lives. But first, let's turn to another cousin. One of the most chilling executions came in 1541, when Margaret Pole, Countess of Salisbury, the sister of Edward Plantagenet, Earl of Warwick, was sent to the block on the orders of King Henry VIII. As the daughter of George, Duke of Clarence, brother to Edward IV and Richard III, she was one of the last surviving Plantagenets, a living symbol of a rival royal line, just like her brother. For many years, Henry treated her with honor, but when her son, Cardinal Reginald Pole, openly defied the king's break from Rome, Henry turned on the entire family. Margaret, then nearly 70 years old, was arrested on charges of treason, accused of supporting her son without real evidence. On May 27, 1541, she was taken to Tower Green. The execution was an exceptional horror. The inexperienced headsman needed multiple strokes to kill her. Margaret Pole remains one of the most notorious victims of Tudor brutality, and the oldest woman ever executed in England. Now we turn to the tragic figure of Lady Jane Grey. In 1553, upon the death of young King Edward VI, The crown should have passed to his half-sister Mary, but Edward signed a document naming his cousin Jane as heir. He and his advisors were determined to have a Protestant ruler, desperate to prevent a Catholic succession. Jane was only a teenager, brilliant, praised for her learning and intelligence, but reluctant to accept the crown. She was a pawn in her family's ambitions. For 9 days she was proclaimed queen, but when Mary marched on London with her supporters, Jane's cause collapsed almost overnight. Mary then faced a choice. Jane was family, her first cousin once removed, and at first Mary seemed inclined to spare her, but rebellion soon followed, led in part by Jane's own father, and the danger was clear. As long as Jane lived, she remained a rallying point for Protestant opposition. In February 1554, Jane was executed. Barely more than a child, she went bravely to the block. For generations, she would be remembered as a 9 days queen and a Protestant martyr, a symbol of innocence crushed by politics. Elizabeth I had lived through Lady Jane Grey's fall and later imprisoned Jane's sisters, Catherine and Mary Grey. But her greatest challenge came from her cousin, Mary, Queen of Scots. Mary descended from Henry VIII's sister, Margaret Tudor. To many Catholics, Elizabeth was illegitimate, while Mary was the rightful queen. After rebellion in Scotland, Mary fled to England, where she became Elizabeth's prisoner for nearly 19 years. Elizabeth resisted executing her cousin. Mary was still a crowned queen, and killing her set a dangerous precedent, but conspiracies swirled around her. The turning point was the Babington Plot in 1586, a direct plan to assassinate Elizabeth. Caught in the correspondence, Mary was condemned. When Elizabeth's council pressed for her death, she signed the warrant. Mary was executed in February 1587. Elizabeth reacted with fury afterward, claiming she had never meant the warrant to be carried out, only signed as a precaution. It was political theater, but it revealed how deeply conflicted she was. From Edward IV to Elizabeth I, generation after generation of monarchs spilled kindred blood to secure their throne. Some acted swiftly, others reluctantly, but the result was the same. In an age of fragile dynasties, mercy was often fatal, and the crown demanded sacrifice, even of one's own kin. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss our next story about the monarchs who chose mercy instead and lost their crowns, their kingdoms, or their lives. Thank you for listening to Meet the Muse.